What's up, y'all? Thanks for tuning into another episode of CultuR HackR. Well, on this channel, the goal is to simply change the narrative. If you're new to the channel, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. On this episode, I wanted to talk about racism. Now, we've all been taught that racism is real. But what if I brought it to your attention that racism could possibly be a false narrative? Here's the definition of racism. Now, if that's the definition of racism, and it has something to do with belief, here is the definition of belief. Now it makes you think. You have to believe in it in order for it to be real. But enough of me talking. Let's hear what an expert has to say.
On the radio, I mentioned well, not on the radio. We didn't make it to the show yet with this. But I said to Andre one morning, I asked him that he believed that racism existed. And he said, yes. And I said, well, before the show is over today, I'm going to prove to you that there's no such thing as racism. It has never existed at all. And so he was trying to prove it. We talked about it a little bit. Then I had Doug on the show Friday and asked him if he thought racism existed. And he said yes. Doug is the computer guy, for those who don't know. And I said, give me an example of racism existing. And he said, this war between Hitler, Germany, and the Jews, right? He mentioned that. He said that was racism. Then I was told by someone this morning that's not racism because both of those people were white. The Jews and the Germans were both white. And so that wasn't a good example of racism. So I want to ask, how many people believe that racism exists?
Just now or in the past?
Period. Anytime. Now, anytime.
Okay, for example, you could look at, to me, the definition of racism is one group of people oppressing another group based on race and, taking advantage of them economically and all that kind of stuff. So, for example, I think South Africa is a good example of that. You had a white power structure that basically dominated and, took advantage of a subservient class of people that were, really primarily based on race.
Based on them being black.
I don't think it's so much it exists in this country today, but I think it has existed. It does exist in other places. The Middle East, I think, in a lot of the Arab nations, are outright racist against blacks and other races.
Okay. What do you say, Forrest? Does racism exist?
No, it doesn't exist.
It doesn't? Why you say no? Yes.
Take off those.
Go ahead, Forrest.
Rose-colored glasses.
See, hatred exists, but people point their hatred at a group of racial people because they see how stupid they act. Like, for instance, blacks, 95% of them vote for Obama, and our country's going down the drain. That's not racism. That's pointing their hatred at somebody who's making a dumb decision. And you can pick out various other groups of people that make dumb decisions, and people point their hatred at those people. And it's hatred. It's not racism.
Okay. So he says no, racism doesn't exist. Does racism exist, yes or no?
No.
And why do you say no?
First, I'll give you what racism used to mean. Racism used to mean in the slave days that you were inferior to your inferior human, that you weren't a complete human, like an animal. Racism today means I don't like what you're saying.
So okay. That's a good point.
Does not exist.
Does racism exist?
It does.
It does exist?
Yes.
What's your proof?
That these groups, these race groups have gone after each other based on just their race.
How do you know it's based on just race?
Because they do some wonderful things, and then they get to feeling superior, and then they start to look down on the others, that's not of their race.
But how do you know it's just based on the color, though, instead of something else?
Well, it is. It's based on what they have or have not done, but then they'll look at it as a general, they're all like that.
Let me ask this.
Racism means they're all like that.
Let me ask
all
this.
the people in that race have that fault.
Let me ask this.
Or have that credit.
Does the Bible speak about racism, discrimination based on color? Is that in the Bible anywhere?
Actually, that's a good question, and I don't remember coming across that.
Don't you think Jesus would have mentioned that at least somewhere walking down the road?
I think he would have.
If it was based on color, he would have mentioned it?
Yeah, now he mentioned them bad Samaritans.
Right, but he didn't mention racism based on color, right?
No, he mentioned just that the salvation is of the Jews.
So it's not in the Bible, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, let me ask because you know the Bible.
Correct.
You may not know anything else, but you know the Bible.
Right.
Right? And that's not in the Bible.
Not that I know of.
Okay. But is it in the Bible that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but spirits and principalities and wickedness in high places?
At this point, I'm becoming a hostile witness. I'm forced to answer to help your case. Yes, that is true.
I'm sorry?
Yes, that is true.
That everything is spiritual and every fight is spiritual.
That's what it says.
It says nothing about color, right?
It doesn't say anything about color. It doesn't say anything about that.
So how did we come up with this word racism then?
Because of the explanation I gave when I was explaining what a race is.
Let me tell you this. There's no such thing as racism. It's all an illusion. And that's what blind people do. When they can't see what's going on, they give you worldly definition of what, ego definitions of what things mean. And then when we fall for it because we can't see it, we become blind too. And we fight a warfare that cannot be won. And this is why this word racism is in every group now. The gays, the blacks, the women, the whatever, everybody, the Muslim, everybody uses racism because that's not what the problem is. The problem is spiritual. It's a spiritual issue. And when one group judges another group, they're not judging them based on black. They have made some other kind of moral decision about that group. Either they are immoral or they are whatever, and they have made that decision and judged that group based on that, on a spiritual thing. But instead of looking at that and understanding it, they give it a physical meaning. And so we start fighting a physical thing that doesn't exist. I guarantee you, we can see spiritually and dealt with this in a spiritual way. Whomever is judging their fellow man is a hateful person. They're not judging them because of their color. They're judging them because they're playing God and they're hateful. And if we dealt with it that way, this stuff would start to end. We would never end this thing called racism because it doesn't exist. It's an illusion. It's a spiritual battle. It's men and women making decisions about their fellow man.
He makes a very great point here. It's amazing how society plays on our emotions. This is a spiritual game, but we're taught to play it from the physical. The key is to get spiritually right, to do morally right. Change your world.
And for example, we all agree that most black people don't like white folks, right? But the thing about it, black people treat other black people worse than they treat white people. Because it's not based on the white man's color, but it's based on them hating what they think he has done. So it's all hatred. But instead of saying, I hate you because I've judged you based on what I heard about you, they say, I hate you because of your color. Because they're blind and can't see. Racism doesn't exist. It's a made-up word. And that's why we can't win. Well, you see it spiritually, good and evil. These people are evil. These people are right. These people are wrong. Based on morality or spirituality, then you can solve the problem. When when God took my anger away, I used to be into my blackness. I used to wake up in the morning and think, well, I'm black. I'm not going to make it. That old white man's stopping me. But once I got over my hatred, then I never think about being black. It's not in me. It doesn't, you know what I mean? Because now I can see that things are spiritual instead of physical. But you got to wake up so you can see what's going on. That's why when I'm doing shows, like TV shows and things, I mention spiritual things, everybody goes nuts. Because no one want to admit, most people don't want to admit that they are immoral, that they are hateful, that they are playing God, that they are judgmental. They don't want to hear that. They rather use the little word like racism, and we just have just a waste of time debating the word race. And then we end the show and everybody feels good about being on the show. But nothing is solved. But you speak the truth, they have a hissy fit. After I woke up, I can see white Americans just like I would see black Americans. I just see what's going on. And it has nothing to do with the person of color at all. But when you're blind, you can't see beyond. You can't see what's going on. You're just looking at a physical person doing something and judging that person. I'm telling you, it doesn't exist. I'm telling you, folks, when people yell at me, even the blacks who are yelling at me, they're not yelling at me because I'm black. They're yelling at me because of what I'm saying. And now they may say you're Uncle Tom because they're so shallow they can't see what's going on. They can only see with their physical eyes instead of the spiritual eyes. So they'll say, oh, you're Uncle Tom. But they're not mad about that. They're mad about what I'm saying because it's a spiritual thing going on. That's why you got to wake up to see that we got to be different from the world. We got to shine light on the lie. When I realized that, I'm like, wow, that's true. There's no such thing as racism. It's another illusion. That's why God wants us to see so we don't judge the person. That way we won't be judged. We won't be condemned. You got to see beyond the person. You got to see beyond the lie to see what's going on. It's not about racism, folks. It's a spiritual thing.
Thanks for watching the video. I hope you learned something from this video. Just something to think about, to just change the narrative. So much hate going on in the world that already was here due to the evil that's in the world. But then we got to remember, this is a spiritual game, but we see it from a physical standpoint. So, after watching this video, do you believe racism is real? Thank you for tuning in to CultuR HackR. On this channel, the goal is to simply change the narrative.
And so we start fighting a physical thing that doesn't exist. I guarantee you, we can see spiritually and dealt with this in a spiritual way. Whomever judges their fellow man is a hateful person. They're not judging them because of their color. They're judging them because they're playing God and they're hateful. And if we dealt with it that way, this stuff would start to end. We would never end this thing called racism because it doesn't exist. It's an illusion.